This talk is by Professor Rajendra Narayanan, who teaches economics in Azim Premji University in Bangalore, and he has had an interesting trajectory in that he did his PhD in statistics in Cornell University, and since then he has moved in a different direction. So besides teaching in Azim Premji, he is also the founder of LibTech India, which is an organization which is about building bridges between research, advocacy, and public engagement. So he engages with a wide variety of subjects, and so we'll hear from him today. And the subject of his talk is ground reality meets data to strengthen the democratic accountability.
Thank you, Sushmita, and thank you, IMSC, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you, all of you. It's always very difficult to come back after lunch, so special thanks to all of you to be a little bored for the next 1 hour or so. Okay. All right. So today the topic is going to be, it's called ground reality meets data to strengthen democratic accountability. So this talk will not be mathematical like what Vijay did in the morning. Was wonderful, extraordinary. I was sitting there and I loved it. But this talk is not going to be like that. It's going to draw on from a lot of work that I have been engaged in, and I must say that it's not just my work alone here. It's with a lot of organizations that I work with. So it's going to be more an overview of a specific kind of work wherein we use data extensively, where we work with a lot of people on the ground and try to see how the stories of what people are saying and what does data say, and how do we combine the two to improve governance, to improve processes, to improve accountability, and so on. Okay, so that's the broad idea. Now, this is a quote from a very lovely essay called On Research and Action by an academic activist called Jean Drèze, and he says, and I quote, you can also read the quote, but I'll just read: the value of scientific research in many circumstances can be enhanced if it is combined with real world involvement and action. This approach should be seen as an essential complement of, and not a substitute for, research of a more detached kind. There is a tendency to believe that any research, especially in mathematical domain, I'm using, since there is a lot of usage of data here, I'm using data in the larger mathematical sense. Okay, so mathematics encompassing data analysis, data presentation, and findings. Now, there is a tendency to say that, research means if you get involved in public action or public engagement, then you will be biasing your research findings. You will only search for things that you're looking for. But that's not necessarily true, is what he's trying to say here, that you don't compromise on the scientific integrity, you don't compromise on the mathematical rigor or the statistical rigor that you use for whatever kind of research work that you do. You don't compromise on that. That is intact. But the questions that drive you come from constant engagement with people on the ground because of the power structures in our society. Some people are more powerful and some people less powerful. That's the nature of society. So if the questions that you deal with come from working with the less powerful or the powerless, so to say, then how can you use research, evidence building, data to strengthen or improve the power of the powerless? That's broadly the idea. Okay, so this is a case study from the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. What it is, we'll go through in the talk. How many of you have heard of the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act in this room? NREGA it's called. Okay, so maybe 30%, 20%. Okay, we'll discuss that and then go ahead. This is a graph on the GDP of India, GDP of a few countries, sorry. And as you can see here, there is a pointer. Yeah, India is in the 5th position. Okay, this is from a wonderful website called Data for India, which tells you a lot, which presents data analysis of very important issues in the country in very simple with very simple illustrations and explanations. So I urge you, when you have time, please go and check it out. It's really nice. So here they are saying that India is in the 5th position as far as GDP is concerned. How many of you have heard the term GDP? Okay, very good. GDP, normally the way we think about GDP is the overall economic output in the country. That's the very broad definition of what GDP is. And normally there's a tendency to say that if the GDP is rising, then the country is growing. And if the country is growing, there's a set of people who feel that if the country is growing, everyone will grow. And there are another set of people who say that that is not necessarily true. Just because the GDP is growing doesn't mean that everyone is growing. It can happen that the overall economic output of the country is rising, but the benefits of that are going to a few select people. The people who are already elite, who are already rich, they get more out of the growth of the country, the poor do not. And these are two schools of thought. And here you can see GDP is at the 5th position, which is not a bad thing. But if you go to the next slide, you see here India is here. What this graph is saying is the total GDP is on the x-axis and the GDP per capita is on the y-axis. Per capita means suppose there are how many? Suppose there are 50 people in this room, okay? And suppose the total GDP of the country is 1000. GDP per capita would be 1000 divided by the number of people. So if there are 50 people in this room, GDP per capita would be 1000 divided by 50, okay? So that's GDP per capita. Now, if the benefits of GDP or the fruits of growth are getting distributed equally in the country, then everyone would rise equally or fall equally, okay? But if the benefits are disproportionately lopsided, that means only a certain set of people, maybe out of 50 people, 40 of them are getting 800 of the 1000 rupees and the remaining 10 of them are getting the rest. So that means it's a very lopsided kind of growth that's happening. So here what this says is that, okay, India is in the 5th position of the GDP as far as GDP is concerned, but GDP per capita, you see, India is very, very behind. It's extremely low, which means that the fruits of the GDP is not getting equally distributed across the country. Some few people are benefiting a lot more from GDP than most people in the country, okay? And there is also evidence, there's a lot of very important research that's being done on the extent of inequality that's there in the country. This graph is saying x-axis shows the year and the y-axis shows the share of national income and wealth of the top 1% of the country. So if you order all the people in this country, then 1%, top 1% would be the top 1% richest people and the remaining would be the 99% less than that, okay, ranking in that order. So if you look at this, what's happening is over time, especially if you notice this streak, this is the income and this is the wealth. And there is a difference between income and wealth. Income is what you earn on a monthly basis, daily basis, if you are a daily wage laborer. So let's say income is what is happening on a high frequency basis, and wealth would include what you earn plus your bungalow, if you have a car, if you have a rocket, if you have any other assets in your house, all that would contribute to wealth, all right. So what you see here is that if you look at the rate of increase of wealth over time, it is the top 1% people are accumulating wealth at an alarming rate. The velocity is really, really high. It's almost like a 90-degree line. It's about 60-degree or 70-degree. That's the rate at which the top 1% the wealth of the top 1% in the country is rising. And if the top 1%'s wealth is rising, and we saw GDP is also rising, then we know if you put the two together, what this tells us is that the fruits of the GDP are benefiting the top 1% richest, okay. So that's the idea. So what this means is the inequality levels in the country are very high. When I say inequality here, I mean economic inequality. Social inequality is a different ball game altogether, okay. Just on economic and financial, if you look at that parameter, then the inequality is rising in the country, because as you see from 87 onwards, this is up to 2022, this graph is very steep, the wealth accumulation of the top 1%, okay. And that should be, now you can decide, you can think about it whether it should be a cause of concern or not. How many of you in this room think that it is a cause for concern? Okay, and anyone wants to volunteer and say why? Why is it a cause for concern? Why should we care about it? Why should we worry about it? What will happen? There's no wrong answer. Okay, the first thing of anything is there's no wrong answer. There's, yeah. That's one, absolutely. The one who has power, suppose I have a lot of money and I want to set up a factory, I will give money to the politician, whoever that politician, whichever political party, and that will favor me. And if I accumulate a lot of wealth, then I decide whom to recruit for work, whom not to recruit. I will decide the wages, how much to pay and not to pay. That's one example. Any other example anyone wants to say? Yeah.
Some of the other way, the resources must be common to everybody. They can only by the top one.
Absolutely.
It's not fair.
Why is it not fair?
That's for everybody. I mean, all those resources should be for everybody. It's not fair if just some population uses it.
Absolutely.
So that's not.
Correct. So the resources are coming in the country. The whole country is producing the resources, but some set of people are disproportionately holding the resources. Think about it this way, that if there's an ice cream outside and I love ice cream, okay, I decide to take half the packet of that ice cream and finish it off. I tell Sushmita that, Sushmita, I am the speaker here. I will take half. All of you will get whatever is remaining from the rest of the half. Would that be okay? Probably not. Okay for me, but not for you. Right? So overall, that would not be okay. All right. Now I'll get into some more data and then build in the context. This was a committee that was formed whose job was to find out what should be the national floor wages. Floor wages is, think about it this way, that no person should get less money than this amount. This should be the daily minimum wage. There is a distinction between minimum and floor, but for the time being, think of this as this is the minimum amount of money that a person should earn to lead a basic life of food, shelter, clothing and subsistence. Okay, just basic life. And that was arrived at saying, it was called the Anup Satpathy Committee. Whatever is in blue, there will be a hyperlink here. So I can share the slides, you can share it with all the participants later. They came up with this number that it should be, this was in 2019, okay. So they said that it should be 375 per day. That should be the national floor wage. No one should be getting below that amount on a daily basis, okay. And we did some calculation. From 2019, there is something called inflation. Inflation is the general rise of prices. So the value, you must have heard your grandmother say that, oh, when I was young, you could buy so much with 100 rupees, but now with 100 rupees you can't buy. That's it. What she's saying is inflation. Okay. There is a value of 100 rupees 50 years ago is not the same today. Today, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 rupees is worth maybe 1 lakh today. So that's because of inflation and so on. So we calculated that the weekly flow wages should be, this was done for a very technical purpose, and this was to be 3050, which means roughly you can say that per month, if someone is earning less than 12,000 rupees, roughly, that means they are not even earning subsistence level of income, not even earning the basic level of money that is needed to live with basic amount of dignity. Okay. Now, there are broadly, before I go to the next slide, I just want to say there are broadly 3 kinds of employment in this country. Okay. There's one thing called regular wage, which means you have a contract, you go to work, and every month or whatever the frequency, you're guaranteed some income. Okay. Then there is something called self-employment. Self-employment is, think of those who have their own shops. They are self-employed. They don't have a contract with any employer, but they have their own shop, they have their own small business. And the third category is called casual labor. Casual labor are those who do daily housekeeping staff, for example. Most likely they are casual labor. Okay. There are many construction workers would be a good example of casual labor. Okay. Now, what we did was we just did a simple analysis to say, in each of these categories, and this is based on publicly available government data. There is a government data called Periodic Labour Force Survey data. Using that, we did a simple analysis, said that what proportion of regular wage workers are earning less than this, what percentage of self-employed workers are earning less than this, what percentage of daily wage casual workers are earning less than this. Okay? And the next slide will show the numbers. What we see is that about 1 out of 2 regular wage workers are earning less than 12,000 a month. About 9 out of 10, which means 90% of casual wage workers in the country are earning less than 12,000 a month. And about 3 out of 5, which is about 60% of the self-employed workers are earning less than 12,000 a month. Okay? Now these numbers are alarming. We are saying that pretty much, and there is something called representativeness of a survey. Okay, representativeness of a survey is when you do any survey, you don't talk to every person. You collect a handful of people, you sample. There is something called a random sampling method. You randomly sample a few individuals, and then you say these individuals are representative of so many people in the country. Okay, and it's a very scientific process. And this survey is representative of roughly 49 crore workers in the country. So that's which you can say that these numbers are realistic for the entire country. Now this number is an alarming thing. This should worry all of us. Okay. Now this is the context of why I want to set the context of the right to work. Now all of us, we are familiar with something called the Constitution of India. Are we familiar? Okay. Good. So the Constitution of India gives some fundamental rights. For example, there is right to equality, which is Article 14. Article 15 says right against discrimination. Article 23 says slave labor is abolished. Article 19 is the most contentious of them. It's called the right to freedom of speech and expression. Article 21 is right to life with dignity. There are many other articles. There are many fundamental articles, but right to work is not there. It is not a fundamental right in our constitution. Okay? But the question is, it's been argued over time, is that if I don't have a right to work, if I'm not guaranteed employment, how am I going to earn? If I'm not going to earn, how am I going to buy food? If I'm not able to buy food, how am I going to eat? If I don't eat, how will I survive? So if this chain of things happen, then my Article 21, which is right to life, is getting violated. Okay? But right to work is not there as a fundamental right. Now, in particular for rural workers, the thing is they have no bargaining power. How many of you have been to a village in India? Okay, so you're familiar with, many of you, that's wonderful to hear. So you're familiar with how rural economy might function. Many of you might be familiar. So one of the things is there is fear of unemployment. In times of when the harvest season is not happening, when it's not rainy season, okay, what do you do? Especially in this season, this is a non-rainy season in most parts of the country. Typically from, let's say, after Pongal, let's say around February to May, before monsoon sets in, you don't have much of agriculture work to be done in rural areas. Okay? So what do you do in that situation? People are just waiting for rains. And especially there are many people who don't have even a single acre of land. What do they do? There are many people in this country who have very less amount of agricultural land. And that agricultural land would require work. So for example, suppose I have a small patch of land and it is very rocky like this. So I might on paper have 2 acres of land, which is also very little. But if it is rocky like this, then I can't grow anything. Correct? So even if there is monsoon, I can't grow anything because I have this rocky piece of land. So many of them, these are some very common features of rural workers in the country, that there is fear of unemployment, there is exposure to exploitation by private contractors. What this means is that you see so many construction workers are there. Especially in Madras now, there is so much of construction work happening, metro work happening. So many construction workers are coming and doing the work. Now, the thing is, how many of us know whether they are, what is the number of hours of work they are doing in a day? What is the amount of money? Are they getting daily wages? If they are sick one day, what happens? Will they get money if you fall? If you fall sick and don't go to class, nothing happens. If I fall sick and don't go to class, nothing happens. I will still get my salary and I will go 2 days later and say that I was sick. Same with you. But imagine a construction worker who is working on a daily basis. If they don't go to work that day, they don't get their wages. So in a way, one can say they can't afford to fall sick. Falling sick is a luxury that many cannot afford. Okay, so that's another thing which is exploitation by private contractors. Private contractors, if you don't come, forget about it. We won't pay you. It's very common. The third thing is distress migration. Distress migration means what? That you see there are lots of people now in Tamil Nadu who are coming from the north. You see so many people from UP, Bihar, Bengal, Assam, Odisha. Are they willingly coming here? Many of them are not willingly come here. It's not as if they are so much in love with Tamil Nadu that they want to be here. No, they're coming out of compulsion because there's no job opportunity there. So it is distress. If we don't earn, we don't eat, that cycle. And in many occasions, when they have to migrate, they migrate with children. And if the children are migrating, their education is lost. So that's another big problem. High levels of food insecurity and health risks, this I've talked to you. And they are low in the hierarchy of power. Right? In a classroom, who is more powerful, you or your teacher? Teacher. In a bus, who is more powerful, you or the bus conductor? Okay. In any space, there will always be a power gradient. Okay. There will always be a power gradient, and in particular, there are rural workers here are very low in the hierarchy of power. Okay. So pushed to the corner, so unable to exercise power, and low on political capacity. When I say political capacity, I don't mean party. Political capacity is your ability to voice your opinion. Political capacity is ability to say that my rights are getting violated. I should not be treated this way. What you're doing is wrong. So the word agency, some people have more agency, some people have more ability to do it. So that's what political capacity means here. So Article 21 of the Constitution of India says that no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to a procedure established by law. This is called the fundamental right to life. Okay, and this is a famous Supreme Court case which is called the Olga Tellis and others versus Bombay Municipal Corporation in 1985, and this is a quote, this is a QUOTE quote from this court order, COURT court order. Okay, so this judgment, from this judgment, this is a small extract which says that if there is an obligation upon the state to secure to the citizens an adequate means of livelihood and the right to work, it would be sheer pedantry to exclude the right to livelihood. Supreme Court judgments have a tendency to use very difficult English. Okay, so many times it's very difficult to understand. You need a special degree other than law to understand what the judgment is saying. So this is not a word that we use in daily language, but it's there. So Shashi Tharoor can be, he can write good judgments, I'm sure. I hope he is not listening, but okay. So you get the idea. What the court judgment is saying is that right to work should be connected to right to life. That's the broad idea. If you don't have work, you don't have life. So the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act is a way to connect these two things, to connect the right to work with Article 21. Okay, and what does it say? So first, there is a substantial evidence to demonstrate its impact. What the program is, I'll come to that. But broadly it says that, oh, there is a spelling mistake, sorry. Providing social protection and to boost rural incomes, addressing deprivation, organizing around NREGA to enhance political capacities, which I told you, strengthening local governance. So these are all some very important, and creating useful and ecologically sustainable assets. What I mean by that is, uh, think about it this way, that because of the program, there are many benefits that have been documented with a lot of research and evidence building over time. Okay, the program itself started in 2005, and what the main aspects of the program are, I'll come, but think about it this way, that how many of you know what a venture capitalist? Any thoughts on who a venture capitalist is? Yeah.
Yeah, person who will fund a startup or something, and they will also get a benefit from the startup, and the startup will also grow. It's a both way.
Exactly, right? So that's a simple definition of a venture capitalist. Meaning, now think about the example of the rural worker I said. I have 2 acres of land, but my land is like this. I cannot grow anything in that. Now, in order to make it cultivable, in order to make this kind of land flat, so that I can start growing some vegetables or any kind of paddy or whatever, if I don't have the resources. I don't have the money because historically I've never been able to grow anything there. If I've not been able to grow anything, where will I get the money? So, what I can do is I can request work to the government saying that, can we please have workers in my village come and work on my farm to make the land ready so that I can start cultivating. Now the idea is that the government will pay wages to all the workers who are working on my farm. Okay, so the government will pay some minimum wages for a period of time. It will be decided saying that for this work we need, let's say, 100 workers to be working for a month. If 100 workers work daily for a month, then they can make the land ready so that I can start cultivating vegetables in it. And there will be a cost associated with it. Suppose the daily wages are 300 rupees or 350 rupees. You multiply 350 into 100 into 30. That's the amount of wages that are needed. That's the amount of money that's needed to help me to make my land cultivable. So the way I think about this is, government is acting as a venture capitalist in this. If the government gives the wages to all the workers to work on my farm, the government is a venture capitalist and ultimately they'll benefit. Why will they benefit? If I am able to grow more, then I am able to create more output in the economy. There are more vegetables available in the market, so the consumption can increase. If the consumption increases, then the overall ability of people to buy and sell increases. And if that increases, the GDP of the country goes up. If the GDP of the country goes up, the country is doing very well and we'll be very happy. Correct? So that's one way to think about the economy and why this program is such a useful program, the way to think about it. This is an example of a work site. And another important feature of this program is that the large number, majority, about more than 55% of the workers who are working in this program, they are women. Okay, majority of them are women. Now, what does the program say? The program says the Act provides up to 100 days of work in a year for any rural household on demand. This is a very important part, at minimum wage. Okay, it's not as if you get work for 365 days a year. No, you get work for 100 days a year. Okay, and it's a household level right, which means suppose there are 2 members in a household, then both of them together will get 100 days of work in a year. It's not that they'll get 200 days if there are 2 people. These 2 distinctions are important. Okay, so you get 100 days of work at minimum wage. What that minimum wage is, every state has a different minimum wage notification. Tamil Nadu's minimum wage are higher than Jharkhand's minimum wage. Okay, there are 3 essential legal safeguards here. Okay, legal safeguards means what? What does the word safeguard mean? Protection. There are 3 important legal protections in this program. One is called unemployment allowance. So let's say I demand work, okay, demand to get work in my village, and if work is not provided to me within 15 days of demanding, then the government is liable to pay me an unemployment allowance. Think of it like a penalty that the government is paying for not doing its job. Okay, because the act says that it's a demand driven act, and this is very important. And the reason why it is structured this way is to deal with the power. Remember, I told you that there is always a power hierarchy. In a rural area or in any area, government is always more powerful than the people. So in a way the program is structured is to make the government answerable to people, to make the government pay for things when it fails, to make it pay some kind of penalty. The second thing is that there is a delay compensation, which means that any NREGA worker, they are called NREGA worker, is entitled to being paid within 15 days of completion of work. And this should be a very standard thing, no? So if I work, ideally I should not be paid, ideally I should be paid that day, or if it's a regular contract based work, I should be paid in a month, but I know in that case that every month I'll definitely get a salary. So here the act says that 15 days of completion of work, within 15 days of completion of work, you should get your salary, you should get your wages. If the government fails to pay you wages within 15 days of completion of work, then you are entitled to a delay compensation. Again, it's a penalty that the government must pay you in case the government is not holding its side of promise. Now, at least half of the NREGA funds are to be used for Gram Panchayat to strengthen local governance. We will not get into that later. And this is very important. Okay, this is a very important step in the transparency. Transparency means whatever the actions are taken by the government is visible to the people. Okay, and that's what we want. In a good society, ideally, it's your and my tax paying money that the government is using. I should know how the government is using the funds that it's generating from all of us. Okay, and that kind of thing is available here. The program implementation details are available on a management information system, which is nothing but a website with all the data, daily transactions that are happening. It runs into terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data. Think about the number of villages. There are about 2.5 lakh panchayats in this country. In every panchayat there is work happening. Every detail of each of the works in 2.5 lakh panchayats are available on a website. Imagine the terabytes of data that needs to be used. Okay, all that is available in the public domain, free of cost for any of us to use and access. There are many useful things of this, but there are many problems of this also. Okay, so the act conceptual clarity is that the act is demand driven. Every household demands work and the government is mandated to provide work. So one important thing is if we sit in this room, okay, suppose we have to do a simple budget exercise. How many of us are here? Suppose we constitute the entire country. There are 50 of us here, suppose, okay, and if 50 of us demands 100 days of work, how many days of work does that become? 50 into 100, which is how much? 50 into 100 is 5,000 or 50,000? 50,000, no? 5,000, okay, whatever, some thousand, 5,000. Now, suppose the daily wages are 200 rupees, okay, then it becomes 5,000 into 200, which is how much? 1 lakh, okay. So ideally speaking, if all 50 of us belonging to different households, and suppose we constitute the country, then, and each of us demands for 100 days of work in a year, then very simple calculation has told us that the budget for this program just to pay us our wages should be 50 into 100 into 200, assuming 200 is the minimum wage, 1 lakh, okay. Now what is happening is the provision of funds has been cut every year. So after a lot of calculation, it was arrived at that for smooth functioning, 1.7% of the GDP of the country should be allocated as funds to run this program. That should be the budget for this program. Okay. Now, the GDP of the country is roughly about 300 lakh crore rupees. Number of zeros, 1 crore has 7 zeros, 1 lakh into 1 lakh, some 12 zeros or something. Okay, that's the GDP of the country. So 1.7% of the GDP should be the budget as per estimates by 2 economists. But this has been the reality. On the x-axis is the year, on the y-axis is the allocation of funds to the program as a percentage of GDP. This is 0.25% of the GDP. This is 0.50% of the GDP. Okay. This means where is 1.7% and where are we? The highest allocation was in 2020-21, which was roughly 0.5% of the GDP. Why did it increase in 2021? COVID. Because of COVID, lots of people went back to rural areas. So they had to get something, they had to get some employment. So the funding for NREGA increased in that year to absorb this excess employment, but it was still much lower than 1.7%. So what you see here is, and you see it is falling every year after that. This year the allocation has been 0.28% or something, 0.28%. So it's something like this, that if in this room we need 1 lakh rupees as the total budget and the government is saying no, we'll give you 10,000 rupees. So what will we do? If the government decides to cut the budget from 1 lakh to 10,000, all of us need work. There are 2 possible things can happen. One, all of us get very few days of work, or the other, many of us feel, what's the point? 3-4 people will say no, we'll work 100 days. So there are 2 possible outcomes. Very few people will get a lot of days of work, or all of us, if we still decide to work, will get very few days of work. But no one, all of us will not get 100 days of work, and that's what's happening. There are implications of low budget is that it's a crisis of funds allocation, delays in wage payments. If the government does not have money, it is not going to pay you money, or it will not pay you money on time. It will delay the payment. So that's what's happening, delays in wage payments, and the wage rates are also very low. Okay, and we'll come to the last part, technology as an enabler or disabler. Okay, this is a very famous Japanese film, okay, which is not Muthu, it's called Rashomon. It's a very old film by this Japanese filmmaker called Akira Kurosawa. Have any of you heard of this film? Okay, if you have seen it, you've seen it, okay, please go watch it. It's a wonderful film. The simple logic of the film, why am I using this here? Simple logic of the film is there is a crime that happens, there is a murder that happens, and 4 or 5 people look at the murder, and each one has a different story about the murder. They see different things in what they claimed to have seen. And that's what I call the Rashomon effect in data. Because depending on who you are, you can see data differently and tell a different story. So online reports, the MIS that I told you wherein all terabytes of data are stored, that showed that 85% of the payments were made on time, which is a good thing. But when we were talking to workers across the country in different states, and I personally have also spoken to thousands of workers across the country, everywhere I went, the same story. I worked, I did not get paid. I worked, I did not get paid. So the question automatically is, whose version of truth is true? Are the online reports true, which says that 85% of the payments were on time? Or are all these workers that we interacted with, thousands and lakhs of people, who are saying, no, we worked but we did not get paid? Right? So there are 2 different competing versions of the same incident, payment of time. That's what I call the Rashomon effect here. So technically speaking, this is the rule. As per the Act, the rule is that suppose you finish work on January 1st, there are two main steps in this. Steps is, suppose you are in a panchayat, in a village, you finish work on January 1st, and then the panchayat officials, suppose it's in Tamil Nadu, it is the Tamil Nadu state government's responsibility to send the invoices. Invoices means they think of it as checks. Oh, you're too young. How many of you have seen a checkbook? Oh, you have. Where? In films, in Shivaji and MGR films. You've used checkbooks. Oh, revelation. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy. Okay, so think of this as some kind of an electronic check and electronic invoice that the state government has to send to the central government. Central government is in Delhi. They have, oops. The moment I said central government, it went away. Came back. All right. So they have to do it within 8 days. Okay, that's as per the Act. Guidelines of the Act says that within 8 days from the panchayat, it has to be electronically sent to the center. So if you finish work on January 1st, by January 9th, it should go to the center. And then the center has to press a button. Think of it like GPay. Okay, if you do GPay to her, how long does it take? Immediate. It's a button that you have to press. That's what the process is. So the central government has still been given 7 days to process the electronic check and to press a button, transfer money to you. So the electronic invoice, suppose I am central government and suppose Vijay is state government in your panchayat. Vijay will send me the details saying that these are the 50 people in my village, these are the works that they have done, this is the name, this is the account number of each person, this is how much they are supposed to get paid. He will send that electronically to me through a computer. I will just look at it, press a button and money will go to all of you. That's the idea. But for Vijay's task, 8 days has been given and it's called a funds transfer order. Electronic invoice is called a funds transfer order. And I get as central government to transfer 7 days. So 15 days is accounted for as 8 plus 7 here. But this is what was happening. When we dug into data, this is what was happening. This is a particular case from 2016 where this green shows the 15-day period within which the workers had to be paid. This blue signifies the time taken by Vijay on average in the country. This was for a particular case, so this was in Chhattisgarh. Vijay took 52 days to send me the funds transfer order. I am the central government, Vijay is the state government. And then I took 40 more days to transfer money to you. Okay, so if you are the worker, what is the total delay that you experienced? You should have been paid within 15 days. Your work finish date was 5th July. You should have been paid by 20th July. But Vijay sent it to me on 10th September and I sent the money to you on 20th October. So the delay that you experience is how much? 52 that he took plus 40 that I took, which is 92 days delay. What does the Act say? It had to be paid within 15 days. Okay. The Act also said if it is not paid within 15 days, then you are entitled to a delay compensation. Can anyone guess how much is the delay compensation? What is the penalty? Suppose I am central government. Today I feel very powerful. Suppose I am central government. I have to pay you delay compensation for each day's delay. Any idea how much that delay compensation is? What is the penalty that I should be paying? Suppose 100 rupees is your wage. 20%. So suppose 100 rupees is your wage and I delay it by 1 day, I should give you 120 rupees. That's the penalty. That's what you're saying. Anyone else wants to guess? I'll take 3 guesses. 100%, who said that? Taleva. 100% would be, I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, if it was 100%, I'd be very happy because then the workers would be so powerful. So that means, huh? Half the amount. So 100 rupees. So he's saying 1 day's delay means 200 rupees I'm entitled to. You're saying 150 rupees. He's the most conservative. He's saying 120 rupees. 1%. You are the most conservative here. And you are actually the closest to the reality. It is actually 0.5%. Okay. So the delay compensation for each day's delay that the government has to pay if your wages are 100 rupees is 50 paise. How many of you have seen a 50 paise coin? This I'm sure no one has. Come on. This in someone is a coin collector in your house. Come on. Really? You've used it. Very nice. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So what was the time taken by the state to send me is called stage 1, and the time taken by the central government to transfer the money is called stage 2. Now this was very difficult from the MIS to get, and that's where the challenge comes in. Is the MIS, the way the architecture is structured is that okay, if I tell you the word payment date, suppose I tell you the payment date is 5th October, what would your impression be? What would you think payment date signifies? The day they receive the money, that's the natural inclination. That is actually not the reality, and that's what we discovered through digging all this data. It's really the job of a miner, an excavator. Payment date actually referred to the date on which Vijay sent me the invoice. Payment date, it's like this: I write the check today, but I don't give it to you today, so you cannot encash it. So 5th October was the payment date, the date on which I signed the check. The date on which I gave you the check was 10th December. That is the date on which you actually got money. So understanding this took a lot of time, as you can imagine. So digging through data, lots of data, taking the data to the people, verifying it, then again going back and digging more data. So that requires a lot of iterative work, and doing this we analyzed over 90 lakh wage transactions. Okay. When you have to, so this is a lot of data to work with, this is a lot of data to analyze, and what we found was that only 21% of the payments were completed in 15 days, and the union government was taking on average more than 50 days to pay the wages, okay, and the union government was not paying any compensation for the delays that it was causing. This was one of the findings. And then there was, once this became, we put it out in the public domain. Yeah. Yes, please.
The payments made by the government to an private citizen are delayed, then there is this particular penalty. What is the penalty if, let's say, a private citizen has to pay money to the government, and what is the typical penalty rate?
The private citizen in what context will
it could
pay?
be, say, a challan or a tax. So is that also roughly the same?
No. I think
Higher.
it's higher, and it differs from the case to case. Depends on the extent of the kind of penalty you're engaging in. But here it's a very low amount threshold. But yeah, there it's a very different. It's like income tax. There are breaks. So this was Ministry of Finance issued a memorandum acknowledging the correctness of the findings, saying that the reason are infrastructural bottlenecks, availability of funds, where they acknowledge that because of lack of funds, we are not able to pay workers on time. Now this is a kind of research for action that I was talking about. What are the elements here? One, we are looking at the entire research question from a public action perspective, from a rights perspective. We are saying that workers are not getting paid on time. What are the reasons? You dig deep into data, do a lot of data analysis, go back with the data to the people, check, verify the data, do a little more analysis, and then put it out in the public domain. Okay, it's all carefully done, rigorous research with a very strong public action orientation to it. Okay, and then the Ministry of Finance acknowledges the correctness, and then this was also argued in the Supreme Court, where the findings, so this is another thing, right? So something that comes from a village, the question, the research question was not something that we sat and decided, okay, let's do this. This came by interacting with people in the village, and on not one village, not two villages, across the country, many villages. Then you go back, you say whose version of truth is true, that Rashomon effect. Then you dig deep into data, then you build your body of evidence, then that evidence is now presented in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gave a strong order. This is in 18th of May 2018, where the Supreme Court reprimanded the central government, saying that you have to pay the delay compensation for every day's delay, which the central government was not doing, okay, because of the way the usage of the word payment date was done. Something as small and technical as that, okay, and that's why you need to look at data with a very critical lens. Don't just accept data when it is thrown to you. Check for the source, check for the correctness, verify, dig deep, and then convince yourself, okay. So this is a quote from the Supreme Court judgment, which I am not reading, but just this one line: the central government cannot be seen to shy away from its responsibility or taking advantage of a person who has been placed in the unfortunate situation of having to seek employment under the act, blah 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 blah. Okay, this is from that Supreme Court judgment. Now, I'll talk about how much time do I have? Okay, fine. So I'll wrap it up in 15-20 minutes max. So this was another thing. This is a separate, so that's one theme of delays in wage payments. And just to illustrate the arc of the journey of the work, to say that from people to the court, from the streets to the court, that's the arc that the research and action question, the journey of that question. Now this is another thing. This is in 2021, the union government came with a circular. Circular means an order, a government order, which said that the payments would now be split along caste lines. Now remember, earlier what was Vijay doing? Vijay was sending me one funds transfer order. All 50 of you are working in the same work site, so there will be one funds transfer order for all 50 of you. That will come to me, and then I will pay all of you at the same time, provided I have the money. The delay was happening because I didn't have the money. In 2021, how many of you have heard of Mohammed bin Tughlaq? Okay, what if, when you listen to the name, when you hear the name Mohammed bin Tughlaq, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Huh? Yeah, he shifted the capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, and then change. But overall idea, yes, that is also true. Huh? Confused, genius is okay, depends on the perspective. But typically, when we say, oh, Seriana Tughlaq da, the interpretation we get is miscalculation. Okay, maybe a confused genius, maybe not, but the broad sense we still get is bad decisions. Decisions that are not a good idea. Okay, in the same way, there was a Tughlaq style decision that was made, which said that the payments to workers would be, Vijay doesn't have to send me one funds transfer order, Vijay will send me three. One for people belonging to the SC caste, one people belonging to ST caste, scheduled tribes, and one for other category workers. So instead of one funds transfer order, the union government decided that every panchayat, every block, every panchayat, every taluka would send me three. And then I will process payments differently. One set of payments. So imagine all 50 of you are working here, and some of you belong to one caste, you get your payments first. Some of you belong to some other caste, you get your payments later. What would happen? Would that be a happy situation in the village? No. It will erupt in fights. Correct? And that's what happened. It's one thing, affirmative action reservation, that's a good policy in a way, in the sense that that talks about historical mistakes, that's a different thing. But this, if all of you are working together, you should get paid on time. The logic cannot get simpler than that. Just because you belong to some caste, you'll get paid later, that was a bit of a problem, and this is what we found. Tensions rise over caste split of Narega wages. Across work sites in the country, this was happening, because people of one caste were getting paid before people of another caste. So there were caste-based tensions. Obviously, in many parts of rural India, the workers were not aware that this was a union government decision. The workers were blaming the local fellow, saying that because of you, these people are getting earlier. So that kind of argument was happening across the country, different languages. Okay, so that's not a very healthy scenario, as you can imagine. Again, data came in very handy. Okay, so we analyzed. It's a pity that you have to analyze so much data to show something which is evident. Okay, so again we analyzed a lot of data. That analyzed data, this is x-axis from April to September of 2021, when this government order was issued, and what we found is that this is throughout the year. This says that 50% of the SC and ST payments were completed in 7 days, compared to less than 25% of the other category. Naturally led to, so once again, there was a lot of public pressure that built up, because people had anecdotal evidence that people of some caste category were paid quicker compared to other. So there was a lot of rising tensions from villages in different parts of the country, and we thought that, okay, let us try and back that what we are seeing on the ground, let us back it with evidence. Once again we resort to the Narega MIS. This is what I call ground reality meets data analysis. We were observing a phenomenon of caste based tensions on the ground, back it up with data to ascertain the extent of this tension, and we found there was massive disparity in the time taken to pay wages according to caste, different castes. So there was a lot of tamasha that we did, brought it up in the public domain, wrote a report, published a report, built up, did press conferences across the country. Many state governments wrote letters to the central government saying this is not done, and finally so again 18 lakh transactions were analyzed. So public pressure plus analysis of 18 lakh transactions ensured that the center decided to scrap the caste based payments in NREGA. Okay, this happened. This was a kind of a big victory, I would say, meaning that a powerful entity saying that, okay, we will listen to public pressure, and that doesn't happen every day. So I think it's credit to all the workers in the country who raised their voice against this, and to also supplemented data analysis which gave numbers to what people were saying, and then the center had to the center decided to scrap it. So this is dated 1st November, 2nd November, and all this. So the data was analyzed to September. The report was released in October. Press conferences held. Lots of news, media, journalists covered the story of tensions on the ground and the report, etc. And then the center had to cancel the caste-based circular. The third thing that I want to talk about, many of you are familiar with this idea of Aadhaar. How many of you? All of you, I think everyone knows Aadhaar. Aadhaar is there everywhere. Okay. Now Aadhaar also plays a role in Narega. Okay, there are three. Am I going too fast? Is the speed okay? Anyone wants me to pause? Any questions? This is the last segment of the talk. This will be quicker, hopefully. Let's see. Okay. So here, again, the idea is the underlying theme. Let's repeat the underlying theme. Underlying theme is what? evidence building through rigorous analysis data. So whatever I'm talking about here is through rigorous data analysis. Okay. How do you analyze the data? How do you present the data? The data has to be presented in a format, in a manner which is easily digestible by people. People should be able to follow. Now, one of the things that if you have to present something to the court, okay, let's take that as the final example, meaning as the ultimate example. Like you do some data analysis, it's one thing that you publish in a research paper in a journal. There are other people who are looking at what you've written are familiar with that idea. So if you're writing something in, let's say, topology, it goes to another journal in topology where the editors of that journal are also topologists. So they know the language you're speaking. They understand what you're trying to say. If you do something in topology and then send it to someone who manages a history journal, they will not understand. Okay. So in this kind of research for public action kind of space, it's important to keep one thing in mind is to how do I communicate my findings in a manner that an average person should be able to understand. Who that average person is, that's questionable and negotiable. But broadly, have that kind of, it's important to have that kind of mindset. Okay. Now in this case, let's say you're presenting some graph or some data to in a Supreme Court case. Now the judge is listening to 20 different cases. Each case is very different from each other. Okay, you have to grab the attention of the judge, make sure that the judge understands what you're doing and is able to, you're able to convince the judge in a very quick, easily digestible manner. It's not easy. Simplification is a very hard thing to do. Okay, if I have to use a complex way to explain something, I can do it. But explaining it to someone you're traveling on a bus with, and that person sitting next to you is wanting to know why so and so thing happened. Imagine the difficulty you will have in translating something. For example, what you were discussing, geodesics on a cone, complicated thing. But the idea was done through experiments, through this, the idea of communicating in that manner was to try and see what is the simplest way we can communicate this complicated idea. Okay. So think of doing the same. If you have to present something to a Supreme Court judge or a High Court judge, whatever, your data analysis and presentation should be done in a very clear, concise, simple form so that the judge looks at it, gets the idea of what's happening. Not easy, okay, takes years of work. Okay, now going back to this, Aadhaar has three different roles in NREGA. The first thing is verification of job cards. Now job card is a prerequisite, it's a mandatory document to get work in NREGA. If I don't have a job card, I will not be able to get NREGA work. Think of this like your identity card in your college. Without that, you won't be recognized as a college student, correct? So it's like that. Like without a voter card, you cannot vote. So without a job card, you cannot do NREGA work. So one thing is verification of job card. So the government has wanted to link your Aadhaar with a job card, and the idea is that Sushmita should not be able to work on my job card. If she has a job card, she or her household members can work. I cannot use her job card to work. So if I link Sushmita's job card with her Aadhaar, then we know that she is the person who's working and not someone else. That's the verification exercise. The second exercise is called, this verification is the seeding of the Aadhaar numbers, and job card is then authenticated against the information Aadhaar database. So all your Aadhaar numbers are in a centralized database. It's called CIDR, Central Information Data Repository, I think. Okay, it's there. There is an entire agency called UIDAI, Unique Identification Authority of India, that manages the Aadhaar of every person in this country. Okay. Now, directing payment. Directing payment is when I pay you. Let's go to the GPay example. Okay. If you have to pay someone through GPay, one way is to take your phone number, and your phone number is linked to your Google Pay bank account, and I transfer money to your phone number because it's linked to your bank account, it goes to you. Okay, so that's one way of paying. When you do bank transfers, what do? You take the bank account number, you take the IFSC code, and you take the name of the person. These three are enough to, if I have these three things with me, I'll be able to transfer money to your account. This is called NEFT kind of payment. Now in directing payment through Aadhaar, Aadhaar becomes the financial address of the individual. Financial address meaning that if I send it to your Aadhaar number, it will go to the bank account that is linked to your Aadhaar. Okay, so these are, and withdrawing money, I'm not getting there, that's a different exercise. So this thing is called in NREGA payments, in NREGA payments, earlier there were two modes of payment. There could be NEFT type payments, which is I can get your account number, IFSC code, name, and I send it to you, it will go to you. The other mode of payment that started was called the Aadhaar based payment system, in which I route it to your Aadhaar number and then it goes to the bank account that's linked to your Aadhaar number. Okay. So ABPS involves three linkages. One is your Aadhaar and job card have to be linked. The second is your Aadhaar and bank account has to be linked. And the third thing, which is often not very well understood, is something called suppose your bank account is in Adyar. You have a bank account with SBI in Adyar. SBI branch of Adyar will have a software mapping with the central database of the Aadhaar database, and that software mapping is called NPCI, or the National Payments Corporation of India mapper. Now, if there is any problem in any of these steps, then you will not get your payment. If I try to send money, your Aadhaar and job card has to be correctly linked, your Aadhaar and bank account has to be correctly linked, and the SBI Adyar branch has to have a correct software mapping with the UIDAI. If any of these three things are broken, then you will not get your payment. Okay. So in 1st February 2023, the Union government made Aadhaar based payments mandatory. They said that from 1st February, your earlier NEFT type payment, which involved your IFSC code, account number, etc., that will be scrapped. Only Aadhaar based payments would be done. And the justifications given were, it will lead to increased efficiency and savings, remove ghost workers. You know what ghost workers are? Ghost workers are those who are not workers. It will lead to timely payment of wages. It will lead to reduced rejections. Rejections are, suppose there are payment failures. I try to send money, but your IFSC code has a mistake, so the money will not go to you, or your bank account number has a mistake, the money will not go to you. Okay. Now the claim was that it will if you do Aadhaar based payments, it will lead to reduction in such things also. Now this is an example, I'll skip this. But what was happening is that since the Union government made this mandatory, many officials on the ground, okay, they did not know the technicalities. So what the officials did was, if they were not able to link your Aadhaar with your job card correctly, then they would delete your job card. So if they delete your job card, then the question is done. We don't have to deal with you anymore. So if I delete your job card, you won't be eligible to work in NREGA. Okay. And what this graph shows is, this was last accessed on 30th November 2024. Every year, so every year some workers are added and some workers are deleted. Workers added meaning some person who's turned 18 years of age, they will be eligible to do NREGA work, so they are added they'll get a job card to work. When will a worker be deleted? If they are dead, if they've shifted permanently from the village to the city or to some other place, then their job card is deleted. The other thing is in the event of a marriage. So typically a woman marries, she goes from one village to another village, so her base native village, if she had a job card, that would be deleted. The fourth reason is the entire village there is a reorganization and the entire panchayat becomes a municipality, a city. then all the job cards in that village would be deleted. These are the 4 official reasons as per the act that the job card can be deleted. But what we saw is that ever since the circular of making Aadhaar based payments mandatory happened, you see a spike. The red shows the percentage of workers who are deleted from the NREGA database. You see there is a till 21-22 less than 5% each year, 4.74% of the workers were deleted. And these were genuine cases of death or marriage or things like that. You see a sudden spike to 20%. This was also brought up in the Lok Sabha. So this is another way of democratic engagement, is try every possible medium of democratic engagement. So you go to the local councillor, you go to different areas of engagement, you engage with the establishment, bring it up to their attention. One important establishment in a country is a parliament. So many of this was used in the parliament by many Lok Sabha MPs. Also through a large network, through campaigns, we take it to the attention of many of these MPs. We say, this is an important issue that is affecting so many people in the country. Please ask this question in the parliament. Okay. Many of us would depose in front of a parliamentary standing committee. There are standing committees, meaning every thing will have a committee of parliamentarians. So you present the findings to a parliamentary standing committee. They will issue a report to raise these issues in the parliament, because that's the highest possible democratic organization that's there in the country. And if still nothing happens, then you go to the court. It's not that you start with the court. So here also this was raised in the parliament also. And another, in a large sample of nearly 2000 villages, when we analyzed, we found that 71% of the workers were deleted on. So this is how technology is written, no? There is a drop down menu in the software. You click a button saying, I delete Vijay from this database, and there will be a list, a drop down menu. What is the reason for deletion? Vijay died, Vijay migrated, Vijay is not willing to work, and you click, you choose not willing to work because no other reason fits in. And not willing to work cannot be a reason to delete. I may not be willing to work today. Are you willing to study every day? No. Are you willing to eat biryani every day? No. So if I say that you will be barred from eating biryani because not willing to eat biryani today, would that be a justified thing? Precisely. Okay. So this cannot be a reason, but we found that 71% of the deleted workers were deleted on these grounds. Now this is the rationale. This is a complicated kind of chart, but these are, how many of you have heard of RTI, the right to information? Okay, RTI is a very powerful tool wherein you can demand questions from the government, and the government is bound to respond to you. So through various RTIs, what we found is, we found different kinds of reasons for them to say why Aadhaar is useful in the context of NREGA. And there is a shifting goalpost. Sometimes they said to remove ghost workers, sometimes they said to improve timely payment. Remember, we saw wages were delayed. So one of the reasons that one of the RTI responses was that because of Aadhaar, we'll make payments would become more timely, and so on. And again, we did a large scale, this was an analysis done based on over 3 crore transactions across the country. And what was found is that there is something called statistical significance. How many of you have heard that word? The idea is very simple, okay? The idea is the following, that suppose in this room, I divide you into two parts, 2 sets of people, okay? To one set of people, I give Coca-Cola. To another set of people, I don't give you Coca-Cola, I give you some healthy drink. And I observe you for a period of time. And then I see that one group of people are demonstrating some kind of ailments. Let's say the Coca-Cola group of people are demonstrating ailments or not. That's the thing. So I would start by saying that, okay, I don't have, my hypothesis would be that there is no difference between the 2 groups. So I will do a statistical analysis. I'll take your blood sample and then evaluate whether there is any change or not. if the one group, the healthy group, shows remarkably better health, or if the Coca-Cola group shows remarkably worse health, then I can say that the two groups are statistically, there is a statistically significant difference in the blood samples of the two groups. Okay? But if there is no difference, then I would say there is no statistically significant difference between the two groups. And there is a, in statistics, there is something called a p-value, which is used to assess this statistical significance. Okay, any statistics course you take, you will learn what this p-value is, and rule of thumb is to say that if the p-value is very small, then you say there is a statistically significant difference between the two. Okay, p-value is very small means less than 0.01 or less than 0.05, that is the rule of thumb. And we found no statistically significant difference in the time to pay workers, whether you use Aadhaar based payments or whether you use account based payments. So it questions the RTI response. The government claimed that payments are done on time with Aadhaar based payments. So this analysis of 3 crore transactions questions that. And similarly, the government also claimed that Aadhaar based payments lead to reduced payment rejections, and we once again find there is no, this thing, what do you call, this, what do you see in the bracket here, 0.626 is the p-value between the two, which means that if the p-value is high, that means there is no statistically significant difference. So there is no difference in the rejection rates, there is no benefit in timely payment of wages either, but officials were deleting workers en masse because they were not able to link the job card with Narega, link the job card with Aadhaar. So that raises the question again, why are you imposing this? Why not give an option to people? Okay. So there are many other challenges with Aadhaar, and something that I have dealt with also. I'll just give you a quick example. This was 2 people in Jharkhand. One woman her husband was a driver in Madhya Pradesh, so she would get money from the money that he would transfer from there. The other woman was building a house in her village. This was under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana scheme. Okay, and she was supposed to get her 3rd installment, which was roughly 50,000 rupees as per the Awas Yojana scheme. Now, both of them had their bank account in the same Bank of India branch. So what happened one day was, this first woman, okay, so the second woman, sorry, who was building the Awas Yojana, went to, there are something called customer service points. She went and put her biometric, which means it will link to her bank account, and she saw 50,000 rupees in her account. She withdrew the entire amount, thinking that it's a 3rd installment of Awas Yojana, and she bought whatever materials had to be bought and started constructing a house. But it turned out to be that when she did her Aadhaar, it got linked to the other woman's bank account, and she had 50,000 rupees, that was her entire savings. Okay, so because there was a misdirected, one person's Aadhaar got linked to another person's bank account, so it was a case of misdirection. So one person lost her entire savings for no fault of hers, and this other woman, thinking that it's her 3rd installment, she used up the money. Now the question is, mistakes can happen everywhere in anything, but who is responsible when such technologies fail? What is the accountability framework? Accountability is responsibility. Who is responsible when a bridge falls? The contractor is responsible, the government is responsible, something like that. We need to pin the blame on someone, someone has to take the blame. In these kind of things, there is no accountability framework as of today. Okay, so misdirected payments were a huge problem, they still happen. Diverted is another thing. In many parts of rural India, the same person will have 3 different bank accounts. So she will not know where the money is going. And if the money is going to some other account, and every time you open an account, people will say link your Aadhaar. So people will just give their Aadhaar, link it. Okay, so if you have 4 different accounts, you don't know which account your money is going to, but it's going somewhere, and then the account becomes inoperative because it's not used for a long time. That's an example of diverted payment. And rejected payments are when there is a mistake in the payment, when there is a payment failure. So the state becomes, for rights holder, the state becomes distant and opaque. Because it's all centralized technology. Earlier, if there was a problem, I could go to my panchayat official and say I did not get my money. There was a direct accountability. But now, the panchayat official will say, oh, I don't know, it's all Aadhaar based complicated. No one knows how these technologies work. Not on the ground. Some experienced high-tech people might know. But when you're rolling out a program like this for the large country, you need to take people's voices, get their feedback, and then design your technology around it. Okay? So the discussion is, there's a very famous statistician called John Tukey, who has a very good book called Exploratory Data Analysis, and he had this famous quote where he says, data does not come with a model on its back. Statisticians love to model everything using some kind of a hyperplane or something, okay? But he would say that no, data doesn't come. So data, I have paraphrased John Tukey to say, data comes with politics on its back. How you design data, how you design technology systems dictates your politics. So goals of technology implementation must imbibe non-negotiable principles, that would be equity, participation, social efficiency, and so on and so forth, accountability, sustainability, solidarity, lots of things, lots of ideal words. Another question I pose here is, can a machine learn democracy? Okay, what does this mean? When we have so many technology data systems ruling, does it follow democratic principles? There is a very nice book, it's called Code is Law. It's a very nice pun. Do you know what pun is? When the same word is used to mean two different things. Here it's by a lawyer, and it says code is law, meaning when the code as in software code, there is also legal code. When the software code dominates and supersedes, overrides the legal code, then your rights get affected. Software code will dictate what your rights are. Be careful of that. This is another, I'll leave these quotes, I'll stop here, but I've ended with techno-utopianism, which is, utopia is the ideal world. Many, especially in governance and technology, they believe that introducing more technology is necessarily good, but I think one has to be critical about it. Be careful, not take data and technology just because it's there, let's not adopt it. Let's be critical, let's take people's feedback in using it. There's a very nice quote by this person called Kentaro Toyama, and he has a very good book called The Geek Heresy, where he says that it's not that technocratic ideas in general are bad, rather the trouble is cultism and imbalance. New vaccines are good, but not while healthcare systems get unfunded. Educational technology might be helpful, but not if good teachers and institutional support are lacking. So it's a very, don't just be blind about introducing more and more, be critical about data and so on. And I end again with a quote by Jean, where he says, action research is part of a larger effort to achieve practical change through action based on democratic means and institutions. Public debate, the media, the courts, the electoral process, street action, among others. Research can help with arguments and evidence that contribute to more effective action. And that's that. Thank you. This is some reference. Is there time for questions?
We can have a couple of questions at least.
Sir, you said that all data are not true. So where we can look for real data? Does we have some true journals?
No, actually what I meant was that verify data, okay? See, it's not always possible to do primary surveys. So you have to rely on some existing data sets, but don't just look at the information summary. Suppose I want to differentiate between two types of data, okay? there is something, there is a survey data that many government agencies do, okay, for labor, for consumption, etc. They do. And those survey data documentation is available online. So read the survey data documentation and then interpret the numbers. Many times in newspapers, just because they want to spread a certain idea, they will pull out some interesting looking number without getting into the explanation of that. Follow it up with the explanation if it's based on a public survey. This is not based on a public survey, but it's based on program data, which is this is called a runtime information system. So as and when the program is getting implemented, the data is getting generated. So question the fields, question the variable names, understand how the variable is getting populated before jumping to conclusion. That's all.
Sir, then the budget for the NRA that is about 80 to 80,000, 86,000 crores, I think.
86,000, yeah.
So you are saying 50 days it takes to be paid, but during that time, where does that money go, sir?
There is no money. Right
That
now
is
the
transaction.
Huh?
Does there any kind of illegal use of that money?
See, there is corruption that happens, okay. There are places where corruption happens and one cannot be ignoring that fact. Now, there are ways, there are institutional mechanisms to check corruption. Unfortunately, that also needs funding. That funding is also not there, okay. So this 86,000 crore that's been allocated this year, it's largely for paying the wages to workers. That money typically year on year, what is happening is that gets exhausted in the first half of the year itself because it's insufficient. So when it gets exhausted, that means there is a backlog in payment of wages. So people are slowly losing interest in the program also. And when people lose interest, that's when middlemen will come in and start engaging in corrupt practices.
Thank you, sir.
So you did show that more than 10%, 20% of the people were removed from the job cards when this Aadhaar based was introduced. And
But what became mandatory. Huh?
So what my question is that is it possible that a lot of them removed were kind of like ghost workers or people who didn't work and get paid some way like that, and that maybe Aadhaar helped to remove those kinds of people?
Yeah, so that's a very legitimate question. And in one of the things I showed, that 71% were deleted on grounds that there are reasons. The drop down reason has fake workers, ghost workers, and the percentage of that was just 3% or something. So majority of them, because they were deleted on the reason for not willing to work.
Yeah, and I had a follow-up question. So yeah, maybe some amount of that, maybe less or more about of that will be ghost workers, and the other might be people who are not actually working or using that, and people who are already doing well, so they never used it, and they didn't want to go through that work, and so they got removed. And that could also be
That could also be there. You're absolutely right. A fraction of people out of that 71% would be that.
Yes.
That's absolutely true, and I've met people like that also.
That's all.
More questions, please.
Sir, do you think this Aadhaar is effective measure for this? Because there are lot and lots of errors and mistakes even in the Aadhaar itself. So is that a...
See, I'm not a big fan personally, and based on these experiences of so many, my point is simple, that if you have to introduce any technology, have a consultative process, do a pilot. By pilot means do it in a small geography, assess it properly, saying, okay, I'm introducing something, I'll do it in a small geography, understand whether it's working or not. If it is not working, I'll try to find out what can be done to improve. And if I'm able to come up with a good model in a small scale, then I will be able to expand it to a large scale. The manner in which this was introduced was that the entire country became a pilot. And the learnings were not incorporated. Okay, there is something called the CAG, which is called the Comptroller Auditor General. And that's an official body that's a public institution, and the job of that public institution is to audit other government functions. Okay, CAG's only mandate is to audit all government functions and come up with the findings saying what are the challenges, what are the bottlenecks, and so on. There was a CAG report which analyzed Aadhaar, and one of the things, I don't remember the numbers right now, but broadly, so think about it, that in many places, in order to withdraw money using Aadhaar, you have to put your biometric thumbprint. Now, if your biometrics in many places don't work, and there are many, especially daily wage workers, their thumbprints don't work. Okay, so when it doesn't work, they are not able to authenticate. When they are not able to authenticate, they are not able to use that system or feature. Now, ideally, if I am trying and if I am not able to authenticate, that information should be retained. At least I should know what fraction of people in this country are not able to do it. The UIDAI does not seem to maintain that data. So, we don't know the extent of this kind of trouble that's happening, and that's what I call lack of transparency. If I know the extent, then we know what the problem is, we know how to deal with it. If I don't even know the extent, then what do I do? So, CAG report also says the number of attempts. So, suppose you were able to correctly authenticate in your 4th attempt. Ideally the Government of India agencies should have the data, say X percentage of people were able to get it only in their 4th attempt. Y percentage were able to do it in the 1st attempt. That's useful information. It's important public information to improve the systems. Okay, those things are important to push for transparency and accountability, and that is missing. And that's what the CAG report broadly was also talking about.